Okay, everybody, we got some very interesting developments today. Let's go ahead and watch this clip from the diary of a CEO.
I talk about in the book, for example, I think it was a mistake to not invite Elon Musk when we had, and I'm no fan of his, but I admire his work as an innovator, what he has done in terms of American manufacturing of electric vehicles. We should have had him at the White House when we had all the other American electric vehicle manufacturers, right?
I think this is part of the problem. When I read that, I was really happy to read that because you can disagree with someone in part, but still have the nuance, be able to acknowledge this part's good. But if you just shut them out because of one thing, then you really drive division.
I mean, this gets back to my earlier point about what's the motivation for the decisions that a leader makes. And the motivation has to be what is for the greater good and have the ability to put aside, those things that may fall in the context of being more personal. But I think we have to do a better job of also focusing on being a bit more bold.
Now, what's very interesting here is that I actually highlighted that clip on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, by saying the courting of Elon Musk continues. And Elon actually replied to that post and said, well, I appreciate the acknowledgement of that mistake. Now, this is the second time that Kamala Harris has publicly apologized or highlighted that mistake from the past in relation to Elon Musk and Tesla. For those that are not familiar, a few years ago, President Biden had an EV summit where he invited legacy automakers like Ford and GM to celebrate electric vehicles, and he gave all the credit to GM and Mary Barra while pushing Elon Musk aside, who's obviously the CEO of Tesla. This was likely done for political reasons, since President Biden at the time was a huge supporter of unions and Tesla's a non-union shop, while GM and Ford are huge union companies. But that alienated not just Elon Musk, but a whole cohort of people that follow him very closely. And obviously that was probably a nail in the coffin of Elon Musk voting for a Democrat in the latest cycle here in 2024, which ended up with Elon actually supporting President Trump, which by all accounts was a huge variable in helping him get elected for the cycle. Now, what's very interesting to see now is that you have the Democrat Party starting to create some rhetoric to try and close that divide between Elon and the Democrat Party. Potentially what they're seeing is like, hey, there has been some sort of a rift that was created between Elon and President Trump, the whole Doge thing. And, I don't have to relive that whole thing, right? And even though they've sort of made amends and made it a little bit cleaner as of late, it does seem like the left, which is being led right now by Kamala, it seems, they're trying to moderate the party by trying to court people like Elon. Now, of course, from Elon's perspective, as I'm sure you're aware, he has some massive industries here in the United States. He has Tesla, but more importantly, he has SpaceX. And SpaceX is by far one of the most important companies that the United States has. Regardless of what you think of Elon, this is just a fact, given that SpaceX has by far the biggest capacity to send rockets into space. They have Starlink, which is a massive asset for defense. We saw how valuable it was in the war between Ukraine and Russia. And on top of that, with their next generation rocket with Starship and their next generation Starlink version 3, they're almost creating this ecosystem of super capable space industry. And as a country, the United States will have to partner with SpaceX to ensure that they're positioning themselves in a very strong place, especially relative to countries like China. So this looks like an effort, from my perspective, I could be wrong, but it seems pretty obvious that this is an effort by the left to try and close the gap for the next presidential cycle for 2028, to try and pull Elon and his influence, Elon and his money, okay, to start donating to left causes or Democrat causes versus the Republican Party. Right now, it looks like the Republican Party will likely lead with J.D. Vance in 2028, given all the different prediction markets and everything. It just seems pretty obvious that he's the heir apparent, from where I sit at least. And Vance and Elon have a quite close relationship, it seems. JD is also from the VC world, the venture capital world, and JD Vance and Elon, I'm sure, have shared many circles in the past. But given that Elon has so much influence from an industry perspective, it's going to be silly for the Democrats to be like, no, just toss him to the side. I think Elon is going to be this sort of pawn in the middle or this sort of chess piece in the middle that both political parties are going to try to court, to try to bring their way. But if you're somebody who's interested in Musk industry, this is probably a huge positive because now the regulatory risks are being massively de-risked, meaning that regardless of who's in office, if it's the Democrats or the Republicans, they won't go out of their way to obstruct Elon Musk and his industry because they're both trying to, let's say, gain favor with that individual. And so the things that Elon Musk industry is working on that are going to be heavily regulated into the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, obviously is rocketry. Obviously, it's going to be cars, but more importantly, autonomous vehicles, things like Neuralink with their brain chip interface, which the company's trying to go hard into from a medical perspective first, and then in the next 20 years, God knows what else. We're going to have those freaking cyborg humans starting to pop up anywhere. I'll let you decide what you think about that. And then we'll also have humanoid robots, which are going to be a very huge variable in industry, but also for home use. In the next sort of 3 to 5 years, the battle, I think, is going to be around autonomous vehicles. Tesla right now is working on scaling up this Cybercab, which is a 2-door, 2-seater, no steering wheel and pedal, designed for autonomy vehicle that Tesla's looking to ramp up somewhere north of 800,000 units per year, or potentially even more in the next 2 to 3 years, with the goal of making this vehicle have more demand than the rest of their lineup combined, which would be north of 2 million vehicles. The big battle that they're going to be facing here is having the regulatory environment from an approval perspective to be able to sell that many cars into the market to be allowed to operate as autonomous vehicles. These vehicles are going to be very disruptive because the cost to run these cars is going to be pennies on the dollar relative to a human-driven car like an Uber. The Cybercab's probably going to have somewhere around 30 cents per mile cost, potentially 25 cents per mile. And you compare that to an Uber, which is going to be north of $2 per mile cost of operating the Uber. And then Uber will obviously charge more on top of that. And so you have this giant difference in cost. And then on top of that, because the Cybercab doesn't have a driver, that means it can operate 24/7. Whereas an Uber driver, really, most Uber drivers are not going to work more than 40 hours per week. Those Uber drivers need to go home, they need to eat, they need to spend time with their families, they need to sleep. They also need weekends off. So if you do the math, a Cybercab is going to be able to replace 3 to 5 Uber drivers per Cybercab. So for every 1 unit that Tesla makes, they're really making 5 equivalent Uber drivers, or even just regular drivers, just like you and I that use our cars to go from point A to point B. So if Tesla, let's say, reaches a 1 million unit capacity for Cybercab per year, that's 5 million equivalent gas cars, let's say, per year. The wave of disruption that's going to bring, not just for car ownership like you and I. So companies like Ford and GM are going to suffer greatly from this because you're going to have these autonomous vehicles start to come in and be able to drive anywhere from point A to point B. But then Uber, right? This is going to massively disrupt Uber's model because Uber is just going to be simply cost uncompetitive. And then taxi lobbies in these sort of like legacy places. Eventually, it's going to hit trucking with self-driving truck companies. This is going to displace millions of people, millions of drivers, and it's going to massively impact the economy in both ways. It's going to create a lot of positives from a cost perspective because it's going to lower the cost of transportation potentially by an order of magnitude over time, over the next 10 years, like 10x. But then on the flip side, it's going to dislocate a lot of people that would have made a living from driving. Now they're not going to be able to drive for a living anymore because why would anybody pay more to have a worse experience? In an Uber, let's say, you have a driver, which is fine, but then you also have inconsistent cars, you have inconsistent drivers, right? And with the Cybercab, you're going to have a very consistent experience. It's always going to be the same car. It's always going to be tailored to what you want. You play whatever music you want at whatever volume. You can set the AC to whatever you want. And each car will be very consistent from an experience perspective. You'll get the same seats, you'll get everything. And then it's private and it's going to be much cheaper and it's going to be safer because the robots, these robots on wheels, are going to be paying attention to the road all the time. And the rate of mistakes they'll have is going to be a fraction of that of a human, and potentially there'll be none over time. It'll have the same safety, let's say, as an airplane with enough data and enough training and enough time. Now, my theory is that Tesla is going to de-risk this potential regulatory hurdle by making Cybercabs with steering wheels and pedals. I'm not going to go super into it. I've already made a ton of videos about this on the channel, and I know some of you are getting sick of me talking about this, so I'll chill about that. But that's going to be one way they're going to be able to overcome that regulatory hurdle. But this kind of rhetoric from the left is now creating a place where potentially Elon Musk and Tesla and his other companies are going to have a friendly regulatory environment in the next 5 to 10 years to be able to overcome these disruptions. There's a lot of legitimate concerns about the disruption of labor, which I share. But we have to make sure that we don't delete the technology, the obviously better technology, because of how it's going to disrupt the labor. What we have to do is figure out how to properly transition into an age where we're going to have technologies that are going to make everything, these sort of core industrial needs from humanity of getting from point A to point B, way more accessible, way cheaper, and way safer. That's a huge net positive. We just have to figure out how to transition from here to there. And we're starting to get sort of the clues that is telling us that, hey, this will happen. Now we have to start a national conversation that says, okay, how we're going to make sure that this is done in a clean way, that it's done in the most sustainable way and least disruptive way to ensure that we're not leaving people behind as we're moving society, our country, our industry into the future. I'll talk about these topics and more on my website, farza.fm. If you become a member, you'll get a ton of exclusive content, exclusive newsletters, exclusive digest, Q&As with me and my community, and a bunch of other stuff as well. So if you're interested in learning more, go to farza.fm. And if you enjoy watching my videos, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Take it easy, everybody. Bye-bye.